So today I'm going to walk you through the steps very quickly of changing a flat tire on a bicycle. I've been fixing up my old commuter bike here, which has been sitting in the garage for a while I've lived out of state, and it needs a little TLC, and the front tire doesn't have any air in it. Now I suspect that's mostly because it's been sitting so long, because tires do lose air over time, but I'm going to go through the process as if I were assuming riding along and found that I had a flat suddenly by striking an object. First thing you're going to do is take the tire off the bicycle. Take the entire wheel off the bike. This is a quick release. Some of them use tools. That's going to be more specific to your individual bike, so we'll get rid of that. So let's assume you've got the wheel off and there's no air in it. Step 2, get out your tire levers. There's a million different types of these things. I've got these little basic plastic black ones here. You can see, and these will give you a way to get under the edge of the tire without damaging anything. If you use a screwdriver or something metallic, you can risk damaging the inner tube or the liner or the tire itself. So these, we're going to take 2 of them, and I'm going to try to do this facing you. First, we'll make sure there's no air in the tire. All right, it's all empty. One under in here between the rim and the tire, and hook it under the edge of the tire bead. Then I'm going to take the other one a couple inches away and do the same. I'm going to work the bead of the tire over the edge of the rim. And now I'm going to try to push these things apart from each other. And that can be a little bit tricky. They're really tight in there. All right, and then I'll go all the way around, and I'm only going to unseal one side of the tire. The other side of the tire I'm going to leave in the rim, hooked on like that. Now the next step is I'm going to lift the inner tube out. I'm keeping the valve up. The valve is right here, so I know where the valve is. And I'm going to remove the inner tube. I'm going to try to remove the inner tube like that. Still leaving the tire on the rim, and I'm going to hold this up like this. Now, if I were on the side of the road, I have a hand pump. And what I'm going to do with that is, again, keeping that same orientation. Let's see if I can get this. The hand pumps all work a little bit differently. This one works not great at all. Etc., etc. I'm going to blow this up partially. I'm going to move to the floor pump because it's just easier to do while I talk. So, one of the things you want to do is make sure that your hand pump has the right kind of valve for the inner tubes that you have. There's Presta and Trader, the 2 most common ones. This tube in particular has a Presta valve. The Schrader is the same style one that you have in your car tires. This is a bicycle-specific one that's been around for about 80, 90 years or so, and it works well on, you'll see it on a lot of higher-end bikes and bikes with skinnier wheels because they have a smaller hole in the rim with this type. Anyway, so we're going to put some air in the inner tube, and again, maintaining that same orientation and keeping track of which way it's facing. And now that we've got some air in it, we're going to search the inner tube and try to find a hole. The reason we're going to do this is because if we can figure out where the puncture is, say I found a puncture here, I can hold the inner tube up against the tire and say, well, the puncture was here, so whatever went through the tire and punctured that inner tube is in the tire here. Because here's the thing, if you're on the side of the trail somewhere, you get a puncture flat, and you replace your inner tube, but you don't make sure that whatever caused the flat is not still stuck in the tire, you're going to have another flat, you know, between where you fix your flat and before you get home, and you'll have used up your spare inner tube. So you check, double check, find the spot, and you know, I'd find it if there's something in there that actually caused a puncture. If you can't find it, feeling around with your fingertips is sometimes a good way to find if there's anything sharp inside your tire. Unfortunately, it's a good way to find if there's anything sharp inside your tire, which you can, if you're not careful, can cut your fingertips as well. Another way to do it is to take a bandana or rag, which I recommend you keep in your bike travel kit, and go around the inside, use that to wipe around the inside of the tire. And that will snag on anything sharp that's still sticking through there. And then once you've found whatever it is, you can use your fingers or the edge of your multi-tool, or if you have a little bit of a pocket knife or something like that, to pry out any debris that's still stuck in the tire. That way you're not going to get a second flat where you had one to begin with. So once you've done that, you're going to take your spare inner tube, and I'm going to pretend this is my spare inner tube, even though I'm just putting the same one back in. And your spare inner tube will be packed away with no air in it. So you're going to take your mini pump, and you're going to put a little bit of air into your inner tube. Pump it over a couple times. Just enough to round it out. And if you're using a Presta valve, you're going to close that lock nut so it doesn't leak away or mess with it. And then you're going to take that partially inflated tube, which again is not bulging, it's just enough so that it's not flat. And you're going to go starting with the valve. And I recommend that you put the labels in line on the tires in line with the valve hole, just because it makes it easier to keep track of where any punctures might be. It also looks cooler, but it's also not vitally necessary. So you put that in there, and then you're going to work the inner tube into the tire all the way around. And inner tubes are, they're basically heavy-duty balloons, so they will expand to fit a range of tires. So if your tire size is, say, 700 by 35 millimeters wide, and you're looking at inner tubes, and some of them say they're 32 millimeters, some of them say they're 40, and you're trying to decide which one to get, go with the smaller one because it'll be a little easier to get in and out, and it will expand to fill the space. As long as it's not a dramatic difference where you're stretching the inner tube too thin, you really don't have to worry about if it's not exactly the right size, but one that's a little bit on the larger size will be more likely to get pinched when you get to this stage of putting it back in, where the smaller one will go in nice and neatly. So now, I've got my inner tube in the tire all the way around. This side is still mounted. This side is still sticking out on the outside of the rim. And I'm going to start opposite the valve hole, and with my hands, I'm going to pop the bead of the tire, which is over the rim, and work it all around. Work it around into the rim bed so the tire is seated properly. And now I've got a partially inflated tube inside my tire, and I will, in just a moment, this is the hard part, those last couple inches. Don't say it. All right, now it's on there, and I'm going to go around, and I'm going to look and make sure that there's no inner tube sticking out underneath the bead of the tire and getting caught in that rim. So that way when I blow it up, it's not going to get caught in there and blow out. And I'll do that, and I'll just go around, make sure it's all in there nice and neat. Once I've done that, I'm going to pump up the tire to partial inflation, about 20 psi maybe. Now everything should be set, and I'll once more go around, just kind of make sure that the inner edge of the tire is hooking into the edge of the rim properly. Nothing's bulging, nothing's falling out. And I'll do that on both sides, even though I never unhook this one side. And then I'll pump my tire up the rest of the way and remount it on the bicycle. And that is how you change a flat tire on a bike. Now, if you're riding a mountain bike that uses tubeless tire technology, you will not have an inner tube in there initially. And a lot of times the sealant will prevent you from having issues with small punctures. But if you get a big puncture or a big rip or tear in your tire, the easiest way to fix it on the side of the road or the trail is to use an inner tube. So this technique works still on for field repairs of tubeless bikes. And there's some oddball and weird, if you've got an old racing bike with tires that are glued right to the rims, hopefully you already know what you're doing enough to do that, because I can't explain that to you in a 10-minute video. But for most bikes that most people ride, for commuting, touring, trekking, getting around, this is the basic technique for changing a flat tire, and it's pretty universal, and it requires a mini pump, a spare inner tube, and a couple tire levers, and a rag. If you are going on a long trip, a patch kit can be a nice thing to have. I like a spare inner tube over a patch kit because sometimes it seems like I only get flat tires when it's raining, and getting patches to stick on an inner tube can be very difficult in wet weather. Patches are light and they're small and they fit in your bag without taking up as much room as an inner tube. On longer trekking trips, I take a patch kit along with my spare inner tube. And if I get a flat tire, like if I'm doing a weekend tour, for example, if I get a flat tire on Friday on my way out, I'll swap my spare inner tube, but then when I get to camp, I'll patch that punctured inner tube, so then I have another spare. And you can always patch tires, patch inner tubes whenever you want, so don't just throw them out unless it's really, really badly damaged. So hopefully this answers any questions you might have about the basics of fixing a flat tire on a bicycle.